Hello, welcome to any night owls who are watching the news and are thrilling with anticipation in the hope that more people's lives will be saved as Trump continues to cancel upcoming events, super spreader events such as his political rallies. So the next one's been cancelled, and people are now looking to Vice President Pence to see if he will announce a positive or negative test result for COVID. And of course, Trump has been traveling with Mark Meadows, his chief of staff. That Mark Meadows' press person has said that Meadows tested negative every day over the last week for COVID. So that's, I guess, a developing situation to just keep an eye on. And of course, the stock market, futures market, is tumbling after hours, which suggests that the stock market may crash when trading resumes tomorrow, which will be, sad for the many, many people who will lose a lot of money. But it was always likely to happen. Trump appeared to be manipulating the Federal Reserve to try and delay a stock market crash until after the election. So if it's brought forward, then at least the crash would disabuse people who are pretending that the economy is just fine and dandy of that notion, and that Trump's good for their 401ks. He's not really. The volatility of the stock market has been quite high since he took office, and his mismanagement of the pandemic response, his willful deceit of the American people and the American governors have made the pandemic much, much worse in America than it needed to be, which has led to terrible economic conditions. His Republican Party, he hasn't pulled them into line in regards to issuing a second stimulus package to help save all of the people whose jobs turned out to not just be furloughed, but to be permanently gone. So there's a lot of economic hardship out there in the general public, and the stock market was a mismatch with that, in no small part because $3 trillion was pumped by the Federal Reserve Bank into corporate bonds, buying Apple and Google and Microsoft, companies that didn't need assistance, but that Trump needed to stay high in order to bolster a plank of his campaign claims that the economy is going to bounce back, because look at how fundamentally sound the stock market is. The stock market is not fundamentally sound. The stock market was high. The stock market was drunk. The stock market was on Adderall, just like Trump. And bear with me 1 second. I'll be right back. Hello? 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 Oh, thank you. All right. It's a delivery, darling. Mummy's getting a book delivered, which is very exciting. I like books. But yes, so I'm not in the US and I don't have money invested in the stock market. So my heart goes out to people who may be at risk of losing substantial sums of money. But my heart goes out even more to all of the people who have been recently evicted and who will continue to be evicted in the days to come, because they're already on the low wealth side of things, and they're in such hardship that the Republican Party has chosen to ignore. So yes, it's unfortunate. I might have to go sign for a book in a second, but what I'll do, coming, is play something for you maybe. Actually, I don't even have time to do that. Oh, yep, CNN reporting. Actually, no. Okay, 1 sec. Now I'm done with signing for things. So let's keep talking about it, about the stock market crashing, Trump and Melania allegedly having COVID-19. Of course, they lie so much. They are such inveterate liars, as is everyone around them. They will lie to say that Trump is not obese. They will lie to say Trump is taller than he is. They'll say anything to give themselves an advantage in the whatever narrative they're trying to sell to the public about everything being normal and okay. Do we know if Trump has it? No, we don't. We don't know. We know that he's cancelled a rally, which is promising for all the people's lives that will save. And it's sad. Trump cancelling an event is going to save lives because his supporters don't wear masks and don't take the virus seriously. And that reality is going to be catching up to the stock market and all the people who support Trump and support Trump's benighted version of events, which is quite disparate to reality. That reality gap has been closed a little bit by the idea of Trump having COVID, even if he doesn't actually have COVID. I'm of both minds about it. It could be a stunt to help him get out of the next debate, which would have different rules because they wouldn't allow him to do the same thing he did in the first debate, and they would cut off his microphone in order to let Joe Biden get an uninterrupted 2-minute response in or 2-minute answer to any question in. Trump didn't want that to happen. He wanted to induce stuttering in Joe Biden, which is why his debate team prepped him with ways to trigger a stutterer. Interruptions, personal attacks, humiliation, references to his family that were extremely negative and untrue, and just a mixture of all of those things designed to create the kind of tension that would make a stutterer really exposed to the risk of stuttering, meaning very exposed to reliance on strategies they have to use as fail-safe measures to avoid stuttering. Circumlocution, starting to say something and then stopping and trying to work around a difficult word. So, no, I'm not mind reading. I have well-informed speculation. Well, I think he'd have to have some more motivations other than pure sympathy, because it's not going to engender sympathy from people in his base who presumed that COVID was a hoax because they'd heard Trump said so. So if they presumed that COVID was a hoax because of what he said, and they then expose themselves to risk and danger, they're not going to feel sympathetic to the man. Yes, of course, Kool-Aid drinkers will often find it difficult to shake their commitment to Kool-Aid. A lot of people are not just committed to Trump, they're very, very committed to not ever admitting that they've made a mistake. And that's an unfortunate character attribute. Lots of people have it. Lots of people have defensive thinking or very strong psychological defense mechanisms that help them avoid ever admitting that they were wrong. Hello. It's Trump's October surprise. Woohoo, I have COVID. Interesting. No one says I'm right. You're listening to well-informed political analysis and speculation. And if you don't enjoy listening to that, I'm sure there's a myriad of other things that you can find available on the World Wide Web. Yes, Telemundo did have a poll saying that. It was an internet poll. And internet polls, did you misspell the word poll? You did. Poll is not like a stripper poll. A poll of people's opinions is spelled P-O-L-L. Not that I want to be a grammar Nazi about it, but it's just good to learn things every day. Everybody's always got room to learn things. And yes, Telemundo had an online poll that Trump supporters typically flock to and rig. In fact, we know that Trump gave Michael Cohen money to pay off people to rig early polls in his favor to give the false impression that he had lots of support, and so create a self-fulfilling prophecy of the appearance of support, adding legitimacy to his candidacy, and thereby helping to bring more people on board. Like, oh, well, clearly he's a legitimate candidate because lots of people think so. He's convincingly won all of these online polls. online polls that his personal fixer, Michael Cohen, was paid money to pay other people to rig. That's good. You're hearing that some Trump supporters are a bit shaken by the news. And you can understand why that would be, wouldn't you? If so many of them have been so obdurate, so stubborn in their attachment to the idea that COVID isn't real and that COVID isn't serious. To have the president and his partner diagnosed with COVID from their own account would be a data point that would shake your conviction a little bit. Don't feel guilty for wishing that he would get COVID. Polls in general, and I applaud your quick learning about how to spell polls, polls that are filled out by people online are easily manipulated, whereas actual solicited information from calling people's landline numbers, i.e. not relying on social media accounts that can be fabricated, duplicated, and fulfilled by bot farms, that's a very different kettle of fish. So we'll agree that polls were actually, well, we won't agree necessarily, but polls were very accurate in the election leading up to the 2016 election, except that James Comey's announcement shortly before the election changed things and swayed a lot of those formerly undecided voters into voting for Trump. And also some polls of battleground states underweighted white working class people because they did turn out in high numbers to vote for Trump. They believed he would preserve their manufacturing jobs, and they were afraid of what elite, well-educated people would callously do to them, that they would be collateral damage in efforts to control climate change or to mitigate substantially against the effects of climate change. And white working class people didn't want to be victimized by white-collar people with university educations who just might write them off as a necessary cost of addressing a broader existential issue. So I think Joe Biden will be better at reassuring white working class voters that he will take action to generate jobs, that someone like Trump did not prevent the closing of coal plants, that someone like Trump started a tariff war, lied to Americans about what tariffs were and who pays that tax. It's a tax paid by American businesses which import goods from China and sell them to the American people. And that tax is then mostly passed on to the American consumer, raising the price of manufactured goods and driving down demand for manufactured goods that are manufactured using component parts imported from China. So there was a manufacturing recession in 2019. Wasn't broadly reported on, but was to a degree mentioned in the print media by respectable economic reporters. And Trump didn't want that to be reported on more broadly speaking. So that gives him a very plausible motivation for failing to address the COVID pandemic. He welcomed a COVID recession to cover up his the recession that his fingerprints were more easily ascribable to him. His fingerprints were all over the manufacturing recession, which was spreading to adjacent industries. So there was an industrial slump in October of 2019. Jobs were drying up in the manufacturing sector. Yes, Harris is a fantastic candidate for vice president. Thanks for trotting out all of your little right-wing talking points. The audience here is not afraid of a smart, capable Black woman who served as a prosecutor and attorney general and is an all-round excellent human being, compassionate, clear-eyed about human nature and its capacity for wrongdoing. So she knows you have to prosecute the type of people who commit crimes against vulnerable other people. So she's prosecuted a lot of sex criminals and QAnon crazy people. QAninnies probably don't like that. They're a troll, and I'm talking to them a little bit just because trolls sometimes raise points that are useful to discuss. Exactly. Kamala is a true American stateswoman and very representative of America more broadly. Do I believe that Trump having COVID-19 is a stunt? I'm 50-50. I'm split 50-50 on it, so it could be either. I don't feel the need to commit to a position. Yes, Joe did well in debates, and I think post-debate polling is showing that there's a 16-point advantage to Biden in terms of people's response to how somebody won. Is that sarcastic sadness, Richard, or are you genuinely sad that Trump has coronavirus? Why be sad? There's not a moment to waste on being sad. How lucky for all of the people who now won't catch coronavirus as a consequence of Trump supporters attending a super spreader event rally without a mask on. Because the thing about COVID is it's so dangerous because it doesn't kill everybody who gets it. It's very low symptoms for a lot of people, but they can still spread it. And then you get somebody who's a super spreader. And the thing is, the more people who die in a nursing home, and the more likely it is that there's high rates of community transmission. Even if you have a lot of young people getting it who aren't obviously suffering. I mean, perhaps they have heart inflammation or hyper blood coagulability that's affecting their organ functioning without them even knowing it. Ultimately, if they pass the infection on to others in their community, it will continue to percolate around their communities until the trapped people get a higher infective dose and die. People in nursing homes, people in prisons, people, children and adult migrants detained at Trump's discretion very expensively in private prisons or public detention centers. Those people are at risk when Trump has rallies. And they kind of know on some level that because they hear the news that COVID is disproportionately impacting Black Americans and Brown Americans and Native Americans. They've heard that, and it helps them feel more safe, and it helps them feel more hopeful that maybe some more of their enemies will be suffering as a consequence of Trump's behavior. Well, if Donald Trump doesn't have it, then Hope Hicks would be the mechanism of pulling off that stunt. So I'm 50-50, as I've said already, that Trump might have COVID, or he might just be trying to get out of the debate. Pence might also be under quarantine and not able to be chewed up and spat out by Kamala Harris as well. Yes, we want him to lose the election, but there is also still risks to the election. It's likely that Republicans will lose in a landslide, but there's still lots of ways that they're trying to cheat and trying to disenfranchise American voters. So yes, having him out, period, is the overarching goal. Yes, it's domestic terrorism, the way he's handled COVID. I am very much in agreement with you. All of the information that's leaked out, Trump's conversations with Woodward on February the 7th, in which he said it's airborne and it's very dangerous. He knew, and there's no pretending that he was just ignorant or so stupid or so toddler-like. All of those things which gratify our egos to look down on a tyrant and ignore the fact that, no, we have ignored white supremacist ideas and white supremacist thinking and systems and organizations. We have ignored white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement organizations and systems. We have been too passive in the face of anti-Black discrimination. And as a consequence, we have a white supremacist in power, and we've just tried to pretend that he's a clown or a moron. He is not only a clown and a moron. He's also a cunning, self-serving, criminal mobster type person who is happy to commit democide against the people he professes to lead. He'll do anything as long as it keeps himself out of prison and as a bonus with access to money and power and wealth creation opportunities for himself at your expense. Yes, of course, one of the great risks with COVID is the moral risk of becoming a spreader. And there's no guarantee how much risk you are of being one of those super spreaders, but it's up to people in leadership positions to communicate that risk to people, that you might not get COVID in any serious way, but you might give COVID to someone else who then gives COVID to their grandparent or their parent, and that children have lost parents. More children have lost parents in the last few months than lost a parent on 9/11. And that's just in New York. Just in New York, more children lost a parent between March and August than lost a parent on 9/11. Trump said that Dems are anti-Catholic bigots. Yes, Joe Biden is Catholic. No wonder Trump was scared of him, scared that the anti-religion arguments or the anti-religious accusations against Dems would be harder to stick with a candidate who does have such a strong religious faith, who wears a rosary, who attends mass. Yes, he's not going to get much sympathy around the world. And hey, Alan. Yep, so I've been making that point as well. And around the world, I imagine people would be celebrating because Trump puts people's lives in danger. He's responsible for deaths without us being able to directly incriminate him. But researchers have pointed out that references to Trump are at the heart of most of the disinformation messages circulating around the world, that people will ultimately make reference to something that Trump has said or done. Yes, Trump cancelling a rally is going to have a very positive effect on the lives of people who will be spared. The Texas government has reduced the number of voting drop boxes, especially in black districts. Yeah. You're liking the new backdrop? That's cool. Hope is very sick. Ooh. Well, that's a data point, if confirmed, mitigating against it being a stunt, because if Hope's very sick, she's more likely to have given a strong infective dose to Trump and consequently Melania as well. Caitlin Collins said Trump was so reckless with COVID, he was bound to get it. I'll never forget him being asked about his rallies and whether they were safe. And he responded only with an answer of how great he felt about his own safety, that he was 6 feet back from everybody, that there was a line. But he was asked about safety generally at the rallies because all of the attendees were standing close by to each other and 90% of them weren't wearing masks, which is highly illustrative of his thinking, that he will approach a question of how am I personally impacted. All right, so I haven't seen any notifications yet about Pence and whether or not Pence has tested positive. CNN is speculating whether Joe Biden should suspend his campaign because Trump can't campaign. Rick Wilson says, no one knows a damn thing about how this will change the election. Stay in the fight, stay safe and healthy, no days off. Now, is the White House failure to observe protocols a reason for Biden to discontinue his campaigning? No. People are talking about whether or not they should drink. Somebody says, I know the bigger blue check accounts will never see this, but if they could, I would tell them that now isn't a time to throw stones or to say or do anything that can be used against us later. This is going to be a trying time. Self-discipline would be hard. Well, we have an easy answer for that. The self-discipline is to continue to say, we are celebrating today the lives that will be saved because a Trump rally has been cancelled. We are celebrating the people that will not get sick, the people that will not lose a family member because one of Trump's super spreader events is cancelled. So that's easy. This is exciting to see people respond real time on the internet. Someone else says, today, my friends, the world, in fact, we all Freud the Schaden. There is enough Freuding the Schaden to go around for everybody. And I'd forgotten that word, Schadenfreude, meaning shameful glee, when you say, yes, MF, 260,000 at least people have died in the US. Now, the official numbers are 208,000 confirmed COVID deaths, but excess death statistics indicate over 266,000 Americans have died. And that's the first 200,000. The next 200,000 will be faster. So we're already mourning the people whose lives will be lost as a consequence of the rallies that Trump has been holding. The unmasked super spreader events that we know. It's not we need to bring balance to this question. We know that people gathering together indoors and yelling and breathing and chanting, saying every chant of lock her up or lock him up in reference to Obama is people expelling droplets from their respiratory system, that if someone's a super spreader, they're carrying infective particles that will be inhaled by other people close by. Those droplets will reach the mucosal linings of their nose and mouth and even the conjunctival membranes of their eyes, and they will get COVID, and they may be asymptomatic, and in the days in which they're pre-symptomatic, they're more likely to be highly infective, and other people will get the disease, and then other people will get it, and it will spread and spread until people who work in nursing homes will get it. And so it doesn't matter about how locked up are all the poor, unfortunate people over 75. The young people who help them will bring the disease to them, and they'll get a cough. They'll inhale enough infective particles that they will get this disease, and they will suffer, and then they will die in isolation without a family member to hold their hand. And this is the tragedy that Trump continues to inflict on people, not only in the US, but all over the world with his disinformation efforts about COVID, all done to, in the most deadly campaign tactic of all time, pretend that a pandemic is not real. We can debate campaign tactics and who's succeeding and who's not, but never forget that one person's debate tactic is death, is to promote death and spread death and suffering and disease. Yeah, no, that's not true. Lots of people gain in age and competence and confidence. So 65 is way too early. Doctors are saying Pence should get tested. Yes, Pence probably gets tested every day. That's what Trump said, that he got tested every day. So the fact that he hasn't come out and said whether he's negative or positive, it's interesting. Somebody's saying, contrary to the CW. What's CW? Common opinion? Oh, Donald Trump. Ronald McTrump getting COVID-19 is not a crisis, it's a reprieve. Trump was going to bring the super spreader to Wisconsin, where the pandemic rages. He was going to spend October inciting racist violence. Now he has to sit in the White House. That's a good thing. I'm going to say that. Today, I am celebrating the lives saved in Wisconsin, now that I know which state, by Trump having to cancel his super spreader rally event. COVID. Someone says, unless Dr. Fauci administers a coronavirus test to Trump live on TV, I'm not buying this BS. So funny, because of all of the distrust we feel, because we've been lied to so extensively. Am I talking a little bit too quick? I am. I'm a bit overexcited, aren't I? Thank you for the reminder, darling. That's Craig, isn't it? Someone says to pull out the hydroxychloroquine. He was down 13 points. How do we slow things down, get a reset, and avoid the next debate so we don't end down 30 points? Sir, say you have COVID and need to quarantine. That has plausibility to it. 50-50, because he is also very careless and doesn't wear masks and acts as if he's the kind of God that the right wing often seem to think he is, that evangelicals often seem to think he is. I saw Caitlin Bennett wearing and selling a t-shirt that said, "Trump is my king." The Pentagon appear to be treating this as a national security crisis. The E-6B is the plane that has the ability to order the killing of everyone on Earth if someone attacks the US with nukes in a first strike. It can talk to our missile subs underwater even if DC is gone. And there's an E-6B Mercury off the East Coast near DC. Interesting. It's a message to the small group of adversaries with SLBMs and ICBMs. So ICBMs are intercontinental ballistic missiles. And what are SLBMs? Does anybody know? So that's interesting. All right, so we have footage of someone, a security expert, discussing it with Don Lemon. Let's have a look. Mm-hmm.
And I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. Again, the President of the United States confirming via Twitter that he is now tested positive for COVID-19, and the First Lady as well. We have been on the air this evening here on CNN since about 9:45, reporting about the president. The president confirming the news that was first reported by Bloomberg Network, that the President of the United States had come in contact with Hope Hicks. Hope Hicks, who is his one of his top aides, closest aides, testing positive for coronavirus. After she tested positive, the president and the First Lady got their tests, and they were awaiting it. The president gave an interview to Fox News tonight, explaining that to Fox News viewers that he was awaiting test results, he and the First Lady, and that they would quarantine. I want to bring in now Samantha Vinograd, who is our national security correspondent, and also Brian Selter joins us as well. So Sam, listen, the news we're getting now from the president, you have said that this was how did you put it, a red alert for the administration when it comes to what could happen. And now I think our worst fears, and I'm sure the presidents and the First Ladies, have been realized.
Don, I said hours ago that this was a code red moment for the U.S. government before we even had these diagnoses from FLOTUS and POTUS. At this point, knowing that the president is sick and that the pandemic is affecting personnel in the White House, this may be the most dangerous moment that the U.S. government has ever faced. The president is suffering from a deadly virus. This feels like something we should be watching on an episode of Homeland. The president of the United States is suffering from a deadly virus. He has to quarantine. He is not able to fully perform his duties as commander-in-chief. Based upon the number of personnel that he comes into contact with every single day without wearing a mask, it is logical that other senior personnel within the national security apparatus could be infected by this virus. At minimum, they will also be unable to fully perform their duties. The U.S. government is incredibly vulnerable at this moment. We do not have a full team on deck, and that means that there are major gaps in our national security coverage based upon this diagnosis.
So what are the risks here? What happens? Because as what has been reported tonight is that I'm trying to get the information there because
So, yes, because it doesn't matter if Trump didn't really do anything as president anyway, other than tweet and cause trouble, and fail to use all the levers of the federal government, such as the Defense Production Act, to protect Americans. He still was there as someone who could push buttons if America was under attack or give orders. So when America's enemies know that he's not likely to be at his Oval Office desk and that he's potentially got this disease that has a higher lethality rate for people over 75. How old's Trump? Is he 74? Anyway, it's he's in a risky age group, and he's in a risky weight range as well, I would imagine. It's a dangerous situation for America because America has enemies, because America doesn't exist in a vacuum. Of course, Russia is very hard hit by coronavirus as well. But as far as we know, Putin doesn't have it.
in full transparency, we had just gotten off the air when this news came across. Twitter, by the way, that the president and the first lady had tested positive for coronavirus. This is what I'm learning, Sam, that the vice president was not in close contact with Hicks, but he was in the Oval Office on Tuesday, meaning that he was now in close contact with the president of the United States, who is now positive for coronavirus. The president is going to have to quarantine. I would assume that some of the work would have to be handed to the vice president of the United States. But if the vice president of the United States has to quarantine as well, then that would probably go to the Speaker of the House. Who knows what happens at this moment? Can you walk us through this? Is there a precedent for this?
Well, sure. The immediate task is twofold. Number one, Don, the president of the United States may be super spreader number one at this juncture, based upon the number of people that he comes into contact with. Before we even get to continuity or simultaneous to that, personnel have to track who he came into contact with to try to stop the outbreak within the top tiers of the U.S. government. Simultaneous to that, there is, as you mentioned, a continuity plan that is in place. Every administration puts together one of those continuity plans, does scenario planning such that if infection does cripple the top tiers of the U.S. government, there is a continuity plan in place. But Don, I don't have great faith that this administration has done any scenario planning. At this point, it is unclear to me that the president and his team have done just the basic homework to try to figure out what to do if the president of the United States is unable to fully perform his duties. This is an unprecedented situation based upon the infection and based upon the White House's lack of preparedness in this situation.
I need both of you.
Yep, lack of preparedness is kind of a hallmark of the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign administration, as we like to call it now. So crossing to something else. Yes, Jared Kushner's there, but he doesn't have the same powers invested in him. All right, let's have a listen.
Everyone who has been in contact with Hope Hicks or in these situations should be quarantining right now.
Yeah, everyone should be quarantining now. And I'll go even further and say that the Speaker of the House should be protected in isolation now, because it doesn't.
Oh, so they're saying, oh, no, you couldn't see that. Whoops. Sorry, I was listening to something that you guys couldn't hear about Nancy Pelosi. I will play it again.
You're saying everyone who has been in contact with Hope Hicks or in these situations should be quarantining right now.
Yeah, everyone should be quarantining now. And I'll go even further and say that the Speaker of the House should be protected in isolation now, because it doesn't violate the rules of physics now for both the Vice President and the President of the United States to get sick. Mm-hmm. And the continuity of government requires that we have a clear leader here, and it's very possible that the president and the vice president can both become sick right now. So I would.
So I'm just going to draw attention to
limit-
Hope Hicks in that picture, just taken just hours before she was diagnosed with COVID. She looks reasonably comfortable, but of course, people can be asymptomatic. Hello. Yes, I'm streaming. It's daytime for me. Yes, the country has been in danger for a long time. Yes, protect Nancy Pelosi. So originally I thought that, just from scrolled headlines, that people were saying Nancy Pelosi had somehow been exposed to Hope Hicks. But I realize now they're saying be extra protective of Nancy Pelosi because she's next in line after the vice president, which is great. That's great that Nancy Pelosi has seniority after Pence, because Mitch McConnell has done so much to make the House be stripped of its power by being someone who blocked so much legislation passed by the House, led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So it's good to have that reiteration of her actual powerful status in terms of a succession lineage, that she is next in line after Trump and Pence, if they are both stricken with COVID, that she needs to be exercising a lot of care because she'll be next in line to run the country. Yes, so that's Hope Hicks from today.
So I would limit activity for the Speaker of the House and make sure that she's really isolated and in a relatively sterile environment.
What do you make of the president now saying that he and the First Lady will begin their quarantine process?
It's the right thing to do, and I applaud them for doing that. But let me just say that at least the initial test result for the president is back. This hasn't been sent off to Quest, and he's going to get it back in 2 or 3 days and wait for his doctor to call him. They have the initial test result. At some point this evening, it would be irresponsible for the White House and the White House physician not to inform the public of the president's status tonight. Almost.
Oh, so that was the news before it was confirmed that, yes, the president has COVID. So that was just when it was known that Hope Hicks had tested positive for coronavirus and had been on planes with Trump. So I wonder what his feedback would be now that he knows. So this is an update about the plane that I was reading to you before, that there is an E-6B plane that has the ability to order the killing of everyone on Earth if someone attacks the US. So let's have a look. So someone had a look at this flight list. What's it called? A frequency CARDOT, C-A-R-D-O-T. I guess it just tells you what type of planes are in the air. Type Boeing E-6B Mercury, country United States. Okay. So that is off the East Coast near DC. And tells American adversaries, look, see, we're on high alert. Do not take advantage of us in this hour of vulnerability now that our president reportedly has a deadly disease. And I'm going to keep saying reportedly because I still consider it to be potentially a ploy. Potentially. Pray for President Trump's health. Well, sure, I'm happy to pray. Please, God, let Trump be of sufficiently sound mind and able-bodied to attend trial for his numerous crimes against humanity and against the people of the United States, and indeed against the people of the world. Oh, Tim Hogan is someone with an interest in security matters. So you can follow his account if you like. It's he's just someone with an interest in political science who knew and I certainly don't know how, to look up what planes are in the air. So he's not making any decisions about the plane in the air. He's just commenting on them, because there are websites that allow you to see which planes are in the air. So in his opinion, Stratcom wants them to be seen. There's another Boeing E6A Mercury. Can you hear my children watching My Little Pony in the background? So yes, POTUS allegedly has COVID, and FLOTUS allegedly has COVID. There you go. So it's just important precautionary measures to take because the United States is vulnerable. Exactly. We don't particularly want Trump to be healthy and hold more rallies to endanger more people's lives. What do you mean you're waiting for a big flash, Alan? Oh, you mean the plane is waiting for a big flash? They just want to send a signal, I would imagine. Trump is in the vulnerable category, and hydroxychloroquine is not really anything with any therapeutic value whatsoever. In fact, to the contrary, hydroxychloroquine is associated with a higher occurrence of adverse events, cardiac-related adverse events, when used to treat COVID-19, which is already associated with disrupted electrical signaling patterns of heart function. I don't support President Trump, but. Conspiracy theory nutcases will definitely come out of the woodwork. The longer Trump has access to a microphone, the more Trump will encourage and reward conspiracies for spreading. He's already endorsed the QAnonies by saying that he thinks they're good people who just want good things. He's already told the Proud Boys to stand by and stand down, i.e., wait for my signal before you fire. So, yep, we've been talking about how Trump and Melania tested positive. What percentage am I in terms of believing it's a real thing? I'm still at 50-50. But in any case, even if it's a stunt, it's still an incredibly significant stunt with incredibly significant repercussions for everyone. Even as a stunt, it's still going to have a profound effect on some Trump supporters who will be forced into recalibrating their attachment to the idea that it was a hoax. Yes, if it's a farce and a stunt, his quick response and quick recovery will proclaim, yes, nobody else has to worry about the 208,000 recorded cases of people dying. But this moment and the turmoil that this will throw America in and the national security implications of this moment will still cause a significant recalibration. So before, somebody told me that betting was suspended around the world. Was it suspended around the world or just potentially in Australia, which is in daylight hours? And people like to bet on things in Australia, but all over the world, people like to bet on who will win the election. So yes, betting suspended, i.e. people will be thrown into turmoil by this, even if it's a stunt, even if it's, oh yeah, yesterday I had COVID and today I don't, so there's a rally on, yay. This is still a very big and consequential thing. And the markets will quake. They are already quaking. The futures markets have fallen out of hours. Oh, and I can share reporting with you on that by going to Ali Velshi, a blue check account who is noting that. Ali Velshi. And then I better go hang out with my children. All right. Nope, wrong one. Okay, so breaking US stock market futures plunge after confirmation that Donald Trump tests positive for coronavirus. I wonder what the Australian stock market's doing, actually. Let's have a look. Australian stock market. Okay. Down 1.39%. And the All Ordinaries down 1.42%. All right. So I don't know how significant that is or how big a fall that is. So yes, I don't know. I don't think Kamala Harris will be able to debate Pence. I think Pence will still be in isolation. How far away was the debate? It was only about 10 days, wasn't it? No, we do definitely want him to cancel his rally because we're not social Darwinists. We don't advocate for the suffering of other people, particularly when we know the suffering is not limited to people who behave recklessly and irresponsibly around the disease. They are not the only people who suffer. There was a wedding and 3 people died following the wedding that flouted COVID regulations and mandates. 3 people who didn't attend the wedding died as a consequence of the path of transmission. So younger, healthier people who attended the wedding spread the disease amongst the attendees and then went away and gave it to other people who then gave it to other people, so that contact tracers eventually found that, yes, multiple cases, over 80 cases, I think, were instigated because of that wedding and its flouting of the rules. And then the 3 people who died didn't even get to have a good time at a wedding. They were just victims of the poor decision-making of the bride and groom and the people who chose to attend that wedding, in violation of mandates to not have indoor events over a certain number of people. So we definitely don't support having the rallies. That kills people. It kills vulnerable people who did not make poor decisions, who did not personally succumb to Donald Trump's white supremacist rhetoric. So no, that's our challenge in this moment, to understand that you should not support Trump having a rally. We should still be all hands on deck to provide consistency of health messaging, because Donald Trump cannot, will not, and decided not to. He could, but he would prefer not to, because he would rather endanger millions of people than do the right thing, because he thinks the right thing would put him at a disadvantage. So uniquely in American political history, Donald Trump is campaigning with death as an assistant. He's campaigning with death at his rallies. He's campaigning to pretend that a pandemic is not a pandemic. So I think that's all from me now. I'm going to go play with my children and celebrate life. Well, nobody's been shot. Trump has a highly contagious disease that in many instances has mild symptoms for people. No, the wedding was in the US. I'll find it for you. Find details. Wedding, COVID, didn't attend wedding. It was in Maine. The wedding was in Maine. I'm sure it was a lovely wedding, just very irresponsible. Now it's linked to the deaths of 7 people who didn't attend. All right. There you go. I should talk about this story every day, because this shows that the risks of coronavirus do not lie in whether or not you should just personally fear death, or if you personally think you are in a risk category. COVID is all about how responsible people can be about protecting people in their communities, including the most vulnerable people. So outbreaks at a rehab center, a rehabilitation center, and a county jail have been linked to the wedding and reception in August in Maine. The number of cases connected to the event is up to 176, with the death toll linked to 7 people. 65 people attended the event in violation of Governor Janet Mills' executive order limiting indoor gatherings to 50 people. None of the 7 people who died attended the wedding or reception. But amongst those who did attend the event, was an employee of the York County Jail, where 72 cases have been linked to the gathering. The state is investigating whether an outbreak at Calvary Baptist Church, whose pastor officiated at the wedding, is also linked to the event. The church is tied to at least 10 cases. In a statement on Tuesday, the church said a number of its members attended the wedding reception and it defended its right to continue holding services. The Calvary Baptist Church has a legal right to meet, they said. The authority of a local Christian church, a Jewish synagogue, or a Muslim mosque to gather for their respective religious services is a time-honored part of our nation's history since its inception. These religious activities are also fully protected under the First Amendment to our United States Constitution. So that is the level of responsibility exhibited by... What's wrong, darling?
I just saw an episode of My Little Pony where other characters join in the episode.
Oh, other characters? Oh my gosh! Do you want to go for a swim with Mummy?
I won't.
She's dressed up as a mermaid today, which is exciting. So hopefully Trump having coronavirus is actually a great time to double down with messaging about how this virus is spread. It's an airborne disease. Hanging out with other people increases the risks. Hanging out with other people where breathing occurs, talking occurs, singing occurs, yelling occurs. All of those activities increase the risk that people will transmit the virus from one person to another. They're so excited. My gosh. All right. Well, thanks for joining with me today. Biden might need to quarantine because of his exposure to Trump during the debate. If it's real. I guess Biden can get tested, but he might have to quarantine. That's okay. If he keeps testing and the tests turn out negative and he has tests over some consecutive days, how long would he need to quarantine for? A week? He can still do what he was doing before, and that he was very adept at campaigning online. He can make appearances on TV shows. People will hopefully chat to him, particularly given the fact that America needs to see its alternative leader who is leading in the polls, who is leading in swing state polls, who is a decent human being who does not deceive Americans for personal advancement. Potentially 14 days, yes. But I think there's some differential calculations depending on degree of exposure. And he was not standing close to Trump. I think they had the debate stage set up so that they were fairly distant from each other. So there's social distancing. Did they shake hands? I hope they didn't. Thank you, Alan. Yes, I'm still celebrating all the lives saved in Wisconsin and more broadly, because what happens in Wisconsin doesn't stay in Wisconsin. The people who contracted COVID for the Sturgis motorcycle rally didn't stay in North Dakota. There was no shaking hands. Great. Yes, they were spaced, but Trump was yelling. True. But Trump only possibly has COVID in any case. He possibly is just trying to avoid future debates. So we'll see. So yes, they were apart and they were more than 6 feet apart. So that's good. Hopefully Biden doesn't have to quarantine, but if he does have to, he'll cope. He's going to have increasingly a very large share of the trust of American people. And of course, he already has the trust of the majority of the American people. It's just we're still on tenterhooks because of the perversion of democracy that is the Electoral College system that favors the opinions and the understanding of people in rural areas who are less likely to understand that COVID is real, who are less likely to watch news sources other than Fox News when Fox News promotes lies about the nature of COVID. Yes, the Electoral College system. I do remember that. And the polling is of states as well as nationwide polling. And I don't know if you've missed this, but Biden's ahead in all of the swing states and significantly ahead in many of them. So, first of all, Trump's debate performance will have significantly increased Biden's lead in those states because women particularly were very repelled by Trump's behavior. And post-debate polling already indicated that Biden had a 16-point advantage over Trump in people's opinions, people's responses to that debate. Yes. So you personally live in a bubble, a pro-Trump bubble, if you do even live in America. And that exists. We know 40% of the population support Trump, but 40% is not a majority by any stretch of the imagination. So enjoy your bubble, but for everybody else, Biden not only has the support of more people than Trump, but also he has the support of more people who don't like either candidate. So the haters. Biden has the haters, and I'll just bring up that article for you. Biden wins among the haters. It's got a great headline, this article. It was published in Politico, which is a conservative-leaning publication. So I don't love them, but I'm still happy to share some of their findings. Trump is getting trounced amongst a crucial constituency, the haters. In 2016, Trump cleaned up amongst voters who disliked both him and Hillary Clinton. This year, Biden is winning big amongst the comparable group. Unlike in 2016, when a large group of voters who disliked both Trump and Hillary Clinton broke sharply for Trump, the opposite is happening now, according to public polling and private surveys conducted by Republicans and Democrats alike. It's a significant and often underappreciated group of voters. Of the nearly 20% of voters who disliked both Clinton and Trump in 2016, Trump outperformed Clinton by 17 percentage points, according to exit polls. 4 years later, that same group, including a mix of Bernie Sanders supporters, other Democrats, disaffected Republicans and independents, strongly prefer Biden, the polling shows. The former vice president leads Trump by more than 40 percentage points amongst that group, which accounts for nearly a quarter of registered voters. It's a huge difference, said Patrick Murray, who oversees the Monmouth poll. That's a group that if you don't like either one of them, you will vote against the status quo. And in the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton represented more of the status quo than Trump did. In this current election, the status quo is Donald Trump. So yes, it was easy to pretend that Trump was an exciting prospect, disruptive, potentially in a good way. He was an unknown quantity. And in 2020, the death and devastation are much more quantifiable than all of Trump's suspicious standing as a multiple-time bankrupt and con artist who some people recognized as a charlatan and other people were very attached to their reality TV mythology of Trump as a successful businessman. I'm glad that you appreciate that I know a reasonable amount about your government and take an interest in the US. How is McConnell doing in Kentucky? He would still be leading. His lead is substantial, but Barbara Collier is doing well, and Mitch McConnell's super PAC has just started to throw a lot of money at South Carolina and Kentucky. There's a much smaller proportion of people in this election who poll saying that they're interested in voting third party. So I think shit is much more real to Americans and American voters now than it was in 2016. And you can still see people living in a fantasy land online who are like, oh, well, I'm not going to vote for Biden because Biden and Trump are both terrible. Those delusional nitwits are much smaller on the ground because the lived experience of living in Trump's America, a lot of people can avoid it and a lot of people can't avoid it. So the people who can't avoid it particularly are women of school-age children. and women of college age children. They cannot avoid the reality of the fact that schools have closed in many instances, and they have to find some way to facilitate their child learning from home and not getting to attend extracurricular activities, not getting to attend all of the pursuits that made their lives worthwhile, but instead have to stay home in front of screens for their education and are losing out on social interaction. All right. So yes, maybe the next debate can be over Zoom. That would make it very easy to mute Trump, wouldn't it? All right, folks, have a great day. Have a great evening. Take care. I hope you can get some rest after the excitement of today's news. You might not be able to, in which case, don't beat yourself up. Just try and lie down quietly and rest. You can still read. But try and lie down. That's my advice. Don't eat anything with too much. Try and not eat anything with sugar or caffeine in it. Try and eat something like a piece of bread, maybe. I will go enjoy hanging out with my little mermaid. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Tex and Russell and Molly. Mummy's coming. I'm going to come play now. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye. See you tomorrow.